Which bike should I ride today? Hello, family, friends, and strangers. Sean here, and thanks for joining me on another video. YouTube is littered with videos that have words like epic and ultimate in their titles. And to be quite honest with you, that all seems just a little bit cheesy to me. How can so many things out there be epic or ultimate? And who is the person that made the video to say that their video is epic or ultimate? Now, don't judge me. I'm well aware what the title of this video is. And it's because after much self-deliberation, I had to ask myself, what do you call a trip that starts out with a ride to visit Ruby Falls in Chattanooga, Tennessee, then a ride along the Cherry Skyway from Tennessee to North Carolina, then on to Deals Gap to end up back in Tennessee for a ride along US 129's Tail of the Dragon, followed by a loop around the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, then a ride along the entire length of the Blue Ridge Parkway and continuing on to Skyline Drive in the Shenandoah National Park. And if you've made it that far, well, you might as well push just a little bit further and take advantage of the opportunity to ride your motorbike through our nation's capital. So, you tell me, what other name could one possibly come up with for this 8-day, 2,500-mile trip other than the most epic, ultimate motorbike trip ever? All of my motorcycle adventures in the past have been solo. This one was a little bit different, and I was joined by a few friends. Now, these aren't just any ordinary friends. These are the kind of friends that you wouldn't hesitate calling if you had to bury a body. Let me introduce to you my good friends, Joe and Laura, and Terry. I hope you'll stick around for the rest of the video and enjoy the ride. The itinerary for day one was to simply get to Chattanooga at a decent hour. With the exception of this short but still fun section of road heading up the hill between Cowan and Sweeney, the ride to Chattanooga was really nothing special. We stopped for lunch at the top of this hill in Sweeney and had what we all agreed to be the most underwhelming lunch of all times. We did get to our hotel with plenty of time to relax for a bit from the day's ride before heading over to check out Ruby Falls. Named after his wife Ruby, Leo Lambert accidentally discovered the falls in 1928. He was actually trying to reopen a different cave that was a popular historical public attraction. The original and natural entrance to the cave he was searching for was sealed off in the early 1900s to build a railroad tunnel through the mountain. Ruby Falls, before it was accidentally discovered, never had a natural entrance, unlike the cave Leo was trying to reopen. Ruby Falls was finally opened up for tours in 1930, and of course there have been many improvements to the attraction over the last 90 years. After a glass elevator ride down 260 feet, it's an easy half-mile stroll along a combination of natural and modified cave tunnels, and then you'll find yourself at a majestic 145-foot underground waterfall, a definite must-see for anyone visiting the area. The plan for day 2 was to get to Cherokee, North Carolina. Unlike day 1, today would be the day that we would start taking the scenic route, driving down some winding roads through mountainous terrains. We pulled out of the hotel in the morning and started making our way to Telco Plains, where we would get on the Cherry Skyway. The Cherry Skyway is a 43-mile National Forest scenic byway that connects Telco Plains, Tennessee to Robbinsville, North Carolina. Its name is a portmanteau of Cherokee and Nantahala, the two forests through which it passes. While fueling up and grabbing some breakfast in Telco Plains, a local told us about Bald River Falls. As it turns out, the falls would only be a 3-mile detour out of the way from the route we were already heading down. 90-foot-high Bald River Falls is recognized as one of the most spectacular waterfalls in the region. It was a great suggestion and a lucky find for us. We ended up spending well over an hour there, enjoying the scenery and the sound of the waterfall. Speaking of the sound of the waterfall, apparently the sound of all that rushing water sure did get the best of Terry, Joe, and I. Shortly after leaving Bald River Falls, we were back on the Cherryhalla Skyway, headed towards Robbinsville and then on to Deals Gap. As we get closer to Deals Gap, we took advantage of one of the many opportunities to pull over to the side of the road, enjoy some of the breathtaking scenery, and give our butts a little bit of a break from being on the bikes. Joe hadn't finished his breakfast burrito from the morning, and he's way too bougie to eat a cold breakfast burrito, so he decides to throw it between the jugs on his motorbike so it can heat up a little bit as we continue on down the road. The smell of burning paper as we pulled into Deals Gap and get off our bikes suggests to us that Joe might have left his burrito on there just a little bit too long. Or was it just right? Deals Gap can be called the entrance or the start to the Tail of the Dragon. It's a great place to stop for a break with a couple of different places to grab souvenirs, t-shirts, whatnots, as well as a small motel and restaurant. From here, US 129, or the Tail of the Dragon, enters Tennessee to the west of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. For a short stretch after the Tennessee-North Carolina state line, you will encounter 318 curves in a distance of only around 11 miles. These curves make this stretch of highway well known for not only motorcycle enthusiasts of all kinds, but a great place for sporty four-wheeled enthusiasts too. After completing the Tail of the Dragon, we hopped on the Foothills Parkway and took the scenic route to Smoky Mountain Harley in Maryville, Tennessee. After leaving Maryville, we made the final push to our hotel in Cherokee, riding along US 441 through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and loving every winding mile of it. This last section of road in Tennessee for sure did not disappoint. We were fortunate to get around a slower moving vehicle early on, and it allowed us to really enjoy this fresh section of asphalt and cruise at our own pace. We stopped at Newfound Gap, located on the Tennessee-North Carolina state line, to take in some of the scenery. From here, our hotel in Cherokee was a short 20-mile ride away. The day and the miles were long, but we were all excited about what was yet to come over the next several days. Tomorrow, we would finally start riding up the Blue Ridge Parkway. So here we are in Cherokee, North Carolina. It's day 3 of our trip, but it's the first day that we're gonna get on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and of course we are blessed with rain. So we're gonna be troopers, and we're gonna go ahead and press on, see what happens. Like I had said earlier, the decision to stay in Cherokee was because of its close proximity to the southern entrance of the Blue Ridge Parkway. This picture here was quite literally the best part of the day, and I'll get into why just a little bit later. The rain would come and go, but as we went higher up the mountains, the fog got thicker, and in no time, none of us were having any fun. As we crested the highest point on the parkway at Richard Balsam Overlook, conditions seemed like they might be turning a little bit more favorable. We took a planned turn off of the parkway onto North Carolina 218 towards Canton, and shortly thereafter is when the bottom fell out. We ended up hiding out at a gas station just south of Canton for what must have been several hours waiting out the rain. Now I have no idea how long it took us to get here, but by this time we hadn't even gone 70 miles for the day. We were all pretty miserable. After considering the current weather and the forecast over the next couple of days, we called an audible. We decided to hightail it east out of the storm and head straight to DC, allowing the weather system that was over the parkway plenty of time to move out. DC always was our intended destination after the parkway, so we essentially flipped our original itinerary around so that we would be taking the scenic route from the north to the south. Just when you thought the worst was behind you, this happens. My brand new tire that I hadn't even put 1,000 miles on yet went flat just west of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. After about 3 hours and $483.26 later, we were back on the road and we ended up only making it to Greensboro for the night. Because of all the time that we lost the day before dealing with the flat tire, we still had about a 5-hour ride ahead of us. We did make a quick stop in Quantico to visit the Harley dealer because they really do have some great t-shirt designs there. We got a hotel in Alexandria, and at this time the plan was to have a shower and then take an Uber into DC where we would spend the evening wandering around the National Mall. The significance of this picture here is that Laura, the only girl on the trip, was also the only one that didn't bring any additional footwear other than her riding boots. Now how did that happen? Wouldn't you know it, shortly after arriving to the mall, we once again found ourselves hiding out from the rain.
Woo-hoo! Best day ever!
The rain did move through fairly quickly, and soon enough we were back to playing tourist. Tonight we traded in our motorbikes for electric scooters. What a blast these things were. We spent several hours riding all over and checking out all of the different sites. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about the history or the significance of the sites that we saw. It's Washington, D.C. There are a lot of really cool things to see, and a lot of really important people throughout history have done a lot of important things there. Some things and people were just more important than others. It's the morning of day 5 and there's a light sprinkle coming down, but not anything to worry about. The forecast over the day's route is looking good. A couple of things we wanted to do prior to leaving was to check out the Marine Corps War Memorial and take a ride around the National Mall. Dedicated in a memorial ceremony on 10 November 1954 by President Eisenhower, the United States Marine Corps War Memorial, often referred to as the Iwo Jima Memorial, represents the nation's gratitude to Marines and those who have fought beside them. While the statue depicts one of the most famous incidents of World War II, the memorial is actually dedicated to all Marines who have given their lives in defense of the United States since 1775. The weather continued to get better as we crossed the Potomac on the Arlington Memorial Bridge towards the Lincoln Memorial. One of the main reasons we wanted to take a ride through DC was because a very good friend of ours used to always talk about one day riding his motorbike through our nation's capital. I know it in my heart that he was right there alongside us the whole day. Bill, Until we ride together again, I hope you continue to rest in peace. You can't help but feel a sense of pride and patriotism as you ride along these particular stretch of roads. They are littered with monuments, memorials, and museums, paying tribute to the men and women that have contributed in one way or another into molding our great nation into what it is today. From DC, the entrance to Shenandoah National Park's Skyline Drive is just about 70 miles away. We arrived at the entrance with plenty of daylight left to make it all the way through the park. Recognizing the need for national parks east of the Mississippi, Congress in 1926 authorized what would become Shenandoah National Park under the condition that no federal funds be used to purchase the land. The state of Virginia slowly acquired land along the crest of the Blue Ridge Mountains, forming a 100-mile-long swath of parkland. The park was established by President Roosevelt on December 26, 1936. Official groundbreaking of Skyline Drive was in July 1931, and construction was completed in August of 1939. So after a couple of days of riding some pretty heavy rain, the sun has finally come out. A little windy, but it's good to be riding in the sunshine. We're finally on Skyline Drive. It goes through the Shenandoah National Forest, and so far we've only been on this road about 20 miles or so from the park entrance, and so far it has not disappointed. At 105 miles long, construction of the roadway was a pioneering work of landscape architecture and engineering, as well as a famous work relief project. Work had begun before the park was even established, using emergency employment relief funds, and continued by the Civilian Conservation Corps, who spent thousands of hours building beautiful rock walls and landscaping sweeping overlooks to make Skyline Drive the experience that it has been for decades. After riding through these last few miles of Skyline Drive, we would exit the park just east of Waynesboro, Virginia. We would be spending the night here before continuing on the Blue Ridge Parkway in the morning. After the rainstorms that we had endured over the last couple of days, we couldn't have asked for any better weather to experience the Shenandoah National Park. So here we are, Blue Ridge Parkway, take 2. We got on the parkway this morning, on the Blue Ridge Parkway this morning after riding Skyline Drive yesterday. Skyline Drive yesterday was a fantastic ride. It was, we caught a little rain on the way out there leaving DC, but once we got onto Skyline Drive, it was still a little cloudy, but it was a fantastic ride, good time. This morning, we stayed in Waynesboro, Virginia, got a good night's sleep, and had a good breakfast at the Waffle House. You know, no road trip is complete without a trip to the Waffle House. But we just finished about 90-ish miles, 80 to 90 miles of the Blue Ridge Parkway. You cannot beat the views that we've been catching, and the ride itself has just been phenomenal. So we still got 370-ish miles of the parkway to go. So far, so good. give the Blue Ridge Parkway definitely thumbs up. The weather continued to be phenomenal on day 6 of our trip, and even though it was miles under our tires that we were trying to accomplish, we couldn't help but take a little extra time and enjoy the sights along the way every chance we could. The Blue Ridge Parkway is America's longest linear park at 469 miles long. Found mostly along, as the name suggests, the spine of the Blue Ridge, a major mountain chain within the Appalachian Mountains. The idea for the Blue Ridge Parkway was born when President Roosevelt visited the newly constructed Skyline Drive in 1933. It was suggested to the president during this visit that the road should be extended to connect with the recently established Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Later on that year in November, this park-to-park highway was approved as a public works project. With a budget of $16 million, a landscape architect was hired to oversee the project, and a vision consisting of a chain of parks and recreational areas with preserved view sheds began to take shape. A study was also conducted to determine the best route for the parkway, with the recommendation being a leg of the highway from Blowing Rock, North Carolina, extend over the Utica Mountains into Tennessee to connect with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The decision was met with great controversy, particularly by the city of Asheville, North Carolina, which found itself in a dire economic strait at the height of the Great Depression. After an intense lobbying campaign, the city of Asheville was able to get the route through their city, and construction of the Blue Ridge Parkway began in September of 1935 near Cumberland Knob, North Carolina. Most of the construction of the parkway was done by private contractors, but a variety of New Deal public work programs were also employed, including the Works Progress Administration, the Emergency Relief Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. When World War II began, approximately 170 miles of the park were open to travel, and another 160 were still under construction. By the early 1950s, only half of the Blue Ridge Parkway was completed. It's the morning of day 7, and we ended up at this biker-friendly hotspot after riding 248 miles of the parkway the day before. There was some light rain during the night, but our spirits were high because another beautiful day was being forecasted along our route. Unbeknownst to me, my life was going to flash before my eyes in about an hour from now. Here it is just before it happened. Did you see it? Here it is again, just in case you missed it. After a quick stop to check my shorts, we were back on the road and headed towards the Lynn Cove Viaduct. Some interesting points about the viaduct. As I had stated previously, in the early 1950s, the parkway was only about halfway completed. It was in the mid-1950s that the National Park Service launched a 10-year development program called Mission 66. This plan included an accelerated effort to complete the construction of the parkway by 1966. This initiative was very successful, finishing all of the parkway's construction with the exception of a small section of road just under 8 miles at Grandfather Mountain, North Carolina. Grandfather's owner, Hugh Morton, a well-known photographer and nature conservationist, objected to the proposed construction at Grandfather, citing the fragility of the mountain's ecology. After years of negotiating, a bridge design and construction methods were developed. The result was the most complicated concrete bridge ever built, snaking around boulder-strewn Lynn Cove in a sweeping S-curve. As the last piece of parkway to be completed, this revolutionary construction project marked the completion of Blue Ridge Parkway's continuous 469-mile route in 1987. The Lynn Cove Viaduct is a marvelous feat of engineering and environmental protection. From the viaduct, Linville Falls is only a short 20-minute ride further down the parkway. From here, you will find several different hiking trails that take you to 4 different viewpoints where you can take in a gorgeous 3-tiered waterfall. On this occasion, we opted for the out-of-shape, middle-aged easy trail that is right at 1 mile round trip. Next was a much-needed ice cream break at Little Switzerland. After taking in some of the amazing views, we took a detour off the parkway to check out some of the other roads in the area. Now there's nothing better than riding smooth asphalt that slithers around hills and valleys. The Diamondback and the Diamondback Loop just so happens to be one of these roads. From Little Switzerland, we descended southwards on the Diamondback, North Carolina 226A, making 190 turns and 12 miles. My goodness, what a ride this section of road was. To get back onto the parkway, we made our way to North Carolina 80 using US 221. North Carolina 80, or the Devil's Whip, is said to be one of the most exciting sections because it rapidly ascends the mountain in a series of switchbacks. In reality, you really can't pick a bad road in this area, and we all thoroughly enjoyed this 30-mile detour off the parkway. Once we were back to the Blue Ridge Parkway, instead of heading north and completing the Diamondback Loop, we turned south to finish up the last 125 miles of the parkway. I don't remember exactly where we were when Joe had the idea we should do some gravity-defying poses for the camera. It's funny how sometimes the simplest things that you find on the side of the road can provide such a good laugh and some great memories. As we pulled up to Richland Balsam Overlook, the exciting and also sad realization that we had less than 40 miles of the parkway ahead of us occurred to me. Another equally but scary thought I had was that we had already ridden this section of road ahead of us in zero visibility just 4 days earlier. Take it from me, it's a much better experience when you can actually see where you're going. And just like that, we unceremoniously completed the 469-mile Blue Ridge Parkway.
Jolly good show!
We spent the night in Cherokee again and had a celebratory dinner at a local sushi restaurant in town. I was pretty exhausted from the day's ride and wasn't up to riding myself, so Terry was kind enough to offer me a ride. Now that's a good friend. It was decided that we would ride the Tail of the Dragon one more time on the way home. As it turns out, this would only add about 3 miles and an extra 20 minutes to our trip, so why not? After finishing up the Dragon, we meandered our way northwest to get on I-40 so we could hightail it home to Memphis. By the time we all got home, we ended up riding almost exactly 2,500 miles over the last 8 days. It doesn't ever really matter how long, how far, or how much of a good time you have on a road trip. It's always a good feeling when you get home and pull into the driveway. It's been a long one, but I appreciate all of you for joining me on this adventure and hope you come back and join me on the next one.